Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Eddie Wineland to defeat Sean O'Malley. And I'm here to talk about Nate Landwehr versus Jamall Emmers. My pick for this fight is Jamall Emmers. I think he's the technically superior fighter, and I think he's got more advantages, and I'm picking him to win in one way or another, and I've bet on him. But I'm definitely going to be betting on Nate Landwehr to win down the stretch at probably some long odds because Nate Landwehr is one of the grittiest fighters in the entire sport. He's a guy where if you can't put him away early, he's the last guy you want to be standing across from in round three. I say this every week about somebody. Last week it was Billy Quarantillo. My apologies. But this week it's certainly Nate Landwehr above anybody else, even Bill Algeo, who's a great builder like that. Nate Landwehr is the guy who's got the grit. And I say all the time, you need cardio, tenacity, and heart to even have a shot at having grit. And Nate Landwehr's got all that shit. His biggest detriment is his chin, and maybe not even altogether, but it's responsible for two losses in the UFC. He lost his last one by Dan Ige to decision, and he was hurt in that fight, of course, but he was knocked out by knees to Herbert Burns and Julian Erosa. And Julian Erosa hit him with a flying knee. But those are longer, taller fighters. They got him with knees up the middle. And even though he's been hurt in fights that he's rallied the win since then, it's still his biggest weakness, and I'd say it's my biggest concern for Nate Landwehr in this fight. And of course, he's going to be at a disadvantage striking, especially early to Jamall Emmers. Jamall Emmers moves a lot better, and of course, he's got 3.5 inches of reach. And Jamall has excellent hands. So it wouldn't surprise me if Jamall got his hands off early and was able to get Nate Landwehr out of there. But if he doesn't, I think he's really going to have to focus on wrestling for the majority of the rest of the fight, because Nate Landwehr is a guy that if you give him any space, he's going to hurt you, especially in the second half of the fight. He builds and builds. Like I said, I will always sprinkle on him winning down the stretch in any matchup, but certainly as an underdog. He's a guy that we've seen it in the UFC with David Onama, even though he won by decision. It still could have produced a finish, obviously. That fight was a fucking war. We saw it with him getting submissions against Austin Lingo and Ludovic Klein, his only two submissions, and they're both in the UFC, which is a really nice feather in his cap. And that anaconda he had on Ludovic Klein, he finished it in round three, but he turned the tides with that anaconda choke in round two and kind of took over the fight. So he's got a lot of deceptive skills. When you watch him fight, you'll see he knows how to grapple. And those traits he's had, the grit, has always been there for him. Before he got to the UFC, he was the M1 champion over in Russia, and he fought a lot of tough Russian guys, grappling-based fighters, and he was able to take everything they had, usually had a rough start in round one, getting ripped to the mat in every fight, knocked down in one of the fights, and he rallied and took over every one of those fights, either putting the guys away or winning a decision. Some would argue even one of them was a controversial decision, but still, no one could argue that Nate was the last man standing, as I like to say. So I just love the traits about Nate Landwehr, and I think they're certainly worth betting on. That's, of course, without me having seen the odds, but I'm assuming with him being an underdog here, they're going to be pretty nice, and I'll throw sprinkles on them. But my pick and bet as of now, with the money line and the over-under staring at me, Jamall Emmers. Jamall Emmers' hands came through for him in a big way, knocking out Dennis Bazooka in his last fight. But Jamall Emmers, his wrestling is his best attribute. His wrestling is his best skill. And even though it may not always get him the decision victory, I don't know how the fuck he lost that Jack Jenkins fight. But it is certainly there for him, his wrestling. And I think he's going to be much more comfortable on the outside against Nate with the longer strikes, but also shooting in athletically and getting inside. He's got an athleticism and a speed advantage, Jamall Emmers. And I think he will be able to look good early, have a chance, give himself a chance at getting a finish. And then down the stretch, even though he's got to watch the finish for Nate Landwehr, he's got the wrestling to slow the fight down. So Jamall Emmers is the pick and the bet. But again, I will wait till the props open, and I will be sprinkling on Nate Landwehr down the stretch because I know traits when I see him. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.